Hey everybody, this is So Many Sequels, your book club for movies. I'm Garrett.
And I'm David.
And
we finally did it.
We
finally got rid of Josh.
I know. Well, honestly, my instinct was waiting for his name to show up too for the next cue. So even after, I was still like, oh, I gotta wait for one more name. No. Today it's just David and I, and we are going to be talking about a classic movie that I'm excited to talk about. We've got an Oklahoma connection to it and everything. Mm-hmm. It is 1996's Twister, as we prepare for Twisters to come out next week or whenever you're listening to this podcast. It may be out. Who knows?
Yeah, it's already here.
Don't forget, it's already here. Could be duck and cover. But first, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It does really help us out. Lets other people know about us as well. And we think we're pretty fun. Let's be real. Yeah. On YouTube, we're pushing towards our next goal of 316. Why? Because Austin said so. We're at like 302 right now. Yeah. I think we decided that if you are the 316th, we're going to toast a beer to you. So yeah, that's your prize. Be ready for that.
Both of them. Yes. Oh, please. What do you got to lose? Smash the subscribe button. Click the notify bell. Find out whenever, because we're posting 2 videos a week now. We got weekly updates and we got podcasts. So you got nothing to lose. All right. Well, let's start with the synopsis for the movie. If you've never seen Twisters, what's it about?
Yeah, during the approach of the most powerful storm in decades, university professor Dr. Joe Harding, Helen Hunt, and an underfunded team of students prepare the prototype for Dorothy, a groundbreaking tornado data-gathering device conceived by her estranged husband, Bill Paxton. When Harding tells Bill that Dorothy is ready for testing and their privately funded rival, Dr. Jonas Miller, Cary Elwes, has stolen the idea and built his own, Bill rejoins the team for one last mission. How did this movie do in the box office, David?
Oh, honestly, very, very well, especially by 90s standards. So Twister blew into theaters on May 10th of 1996, bringing in $41 million in its opening weekend. We talked about in our weekly update Longlegs only being in 2,000 theaters, and that's kind of like half the theaters in the United States. Twisters was in 2,000 theaters, and that was pretty much as many theaters as it could get in 1996. It's in 2,400 theaters. That's a 17,000 average. The rest of the top 5 that week was at number 2, The Truth About Cats and Dogs at 3.8. The Craft, which we've reviewed, The Craft from last year, was
great movie.
Was number 3 that weekend with 3.6. Number 4, Primal Fear, great movie. I don't know if you've ever seen Primal Fear. That's a good movie.
I have not.
And at number 5, The Quest. Not Johnny Quest, but The Quest. I'm also going to throw in here that at the number 6 spot was The Birdcage. And at number 8 was James and the Giant Peach. I was going to throw those out there. So 96 was a fun year I'm remembering for movies.
Very interesting year, yeah, for sure.
Twister would go on to make Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, continue, please.
Yeah, so Twister went on to make $241 million in the United States, and only in the United States. No international release for Twister back then. I think I've mentioned this to you before, that international releases didn't really become a thing until around the time of Titanic in '99, and then all of a sudden, once that happened, international became almost more important than domestic in some cases. Some of these big franchises we have today, they rely on that overseas. Like Fast and the Furious movies, if you look at the numbers, most of the money those movies make is overseas. It's like 65, 40, 35. Excuse me, get the math right, David. Twisters, or excuse me, I'm going to do that a lot this episode. Twister was actually the number 2 movie of 1996. Garrett, I'm going to give you the chance. Do you know the number 1 movie in 1996?
I do, because I have done we'll get into it later, but it was Independence Day.
It was Independence Day, exactly, starring Will Smith and Bill Pullman.
Jeff Goldblum. Oh, yeah, Bill Pullman. Yeah, for sure.
Not Bill Paxton, but Bill Pullman. 2 Bills.
The other Bill.
2 Bill P's in the top two this year.
A $2 bill.
And then number 3 and 4 is back-to-back Cruise. It's Mission Impossible and Jerry Maguire at number 4. And then the movie Ransom, I believe starring Mel Gibson. Let me double check that.
That's a good movie. Yeah,
Mel Gibson. Yeah, with Ransom. was number 5. So overall, the highest grossing movie of the year, $300 million in the U.S. Twister, Mission Impossible, Jerry Maguire, Ransom. So pretty fun year. Some other movies that came out the year: The Rock, not Dwayne, but Michael Bay's The Rock. The Nutty Professor came out that year. Scream, which we just recently reviewed, also came out in '96. So a pretty fun year overall. A year we should revisit more often. But that is your box office run for Twister.
Nice. Well, David, I'm excited to talk about Twister because, again, as a podcast based on movies in Oklahoma, I mean, this movie put us on the map, I feel like, initially.
Yeah.
This is fully Oklahoma, filmed in Oklahoma. Josh and I, when we were younger, had a different little project called OK Connection, and we traveled up to Wichita, Oklahoma, which is in the movie, and there is a Twister movie museum. And so it's a little fun little behind the scenes about that.
Yeah. I was going to say, they have one of the Dorothys, don't they?
They do. When you first walk in, you see one of the original Dorothys. It's pretty cool to see that and a lot of different things. You get some home movies of Bill playing football with some of the people in there. And, you know, he dedicated a lot of time to this museum. So I'm really excited to talk about it. But I think for me, I would like to hear from you and your experience with this movie and how you feel about it.
You know, interestingly, while we're a big Oklahoma podcast, I've been living in Oklahoma now for longer. But I grew up in Arkansas, so I didn't have the initial connection to this movie. So when this movie came out, I have vague memories of it. So, you know, we were, spoiler alert, we were 6. And you might have been 7. I think you were born in 89, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you might have been, I don't remember.
6 or 7.
Doesn't matter, because my memories of this movie were so freaking incomplete. I've only seen this movie maybe 2 times in my life. And they were both probably a long time ago. I think I probably watched it at home when I was 8 or 9 from a Blockbuster rental. And then I probably saw it sometime in my teens, and then I haven't seen it since. And I gotta say, there are parts of this movie that are still fun. There are other parts that, to me, are kind of showing their age. And there's some things of growing our careers, because you and I have shared this, in and around meteorology and news, sort of, I think, ruined elements of it for me. I feel like probably somebody who knows a lot about sharks watching a shark movie. Because there's elements of it where I was like, well, no, not even in '95, that wasn't how that worked. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Some of the scientific weirdness. Still, I did have fun. I enjoyed myself. I don't think I'm as crazy about it as maybe some of our friends are. At times, I don't know. We'll get into the characters. At times, it felt like I was being forced to sit in the back seat while mom and dad were having a fight while watching this movie. And we'll talk about the characters more soon. But that's sort of my thing with it. I don't have quite the nostalgia for this that other people do. Other people that I know do. Like, I know our friend Arch really likes this movie. I think Steven has a certain enjoyment of this movie. I think Josh really likes it, from what I remember. But what about you? You have a much more personal connection to the movie. So how did it hold up this particular watch?
For me, it's constantly enjoyable. I'm pretty sure I saw this movie at a drive-in the first time. I'm pretty sure I saw it at Admiral Twin at some point in time.
Not the Galaxy.
Yeah. And so it is, for me, I love a disaster movie if it's done right. And this is a really well done disaster movie. And yes, it is not necessarily scientifically accurate, but at the time, tornadoes were still kind of like, to the general person, something just terrifying. That's all they knew about it. They didn't know how it worked. They didn't need to know how it worked. Yeah, whatever. Okay, it's not real. Yes, it's not. That part doesn't bother me one bit, because very rarely are any of these disaster movies scientifically accurate.
It's true,
and that's okay, because I just want to see how they save the world.
Yes, or in this case, study the tornado.
Yes, and I think that's why I find this movie so enjoyable, because disaster movies sometimes fall into the whole world has to be coming to an end, and that's pretty high stakes and unrealistic. But this, in general, if you paint in broad strokes, is generally believable as far as a tornado. And I like that the story stair steps along with the scale. I think the scale has changed now. You might know more than me on that, but it was E 0 to 5, right? And they kind of had a few, like the story develops over time with these tornadoes. You get a couple, and they're fun and exciting, and then they're not. As they get bigger, and they do a good job of warning you and showing you how different it is. And so for me, there's a lot of enjoyment and connection to it, especially because it is so Oklahoma focused, and that they shot it here, and it's just it's one that I will always be happy to revisit.
So getting into the story a little bit, at times I felt like it's a little too much. They kind of have too many balls in they have this divorce with Bill Pullman, they have his current wife who's like there for the ride, they have this rivalry with Kari Ellis, and then they have the desire to get these Dorothy devices into a tornado so that they can study them, right? And I kind of feel like they could have done maybe with one less of those things, or at the very least, maybe just not had the new wife along for the ride. I don't know, because I kind of feel like the romantic drama for me was kind of like, oh boy, we got to get back to the tornadoes. Some of the side characters I actually would have loved to have seen more, like Philip Seymour Hoffman's character. Jeremy Davies plays a very, very normal guy, but I like him a lot. So I would have liked to have maybe seen more of them as opposed to some of these other moments. But I think that while the premise is really fun, there was a lot of times where I was like, oh, that's just stupid. Why did you do that? One of them when they were hiding under the bridge, I was like, that's not a good idea. There was a point where I can't remember exactly what it. Well, so like they talk about Kari Ellis. Oh, he's a nightcrawler, and we know a couple. I think we know a couple nightcrawlers, and I'm like, and they're like, he's all about corporate sponsors, and I was like, oh boy, Bill would not be happy with what Storm Chasers have today. They all got corporate sponsors. Just a little. He's not in it for the science. He's in it for the money. And I'm like, okay, that's a little much.
That's how it goes most of the time.
It's gonna sound like I don't like it. I do enjoy it, but I'm at a point where I can view it and be like, okay, all right, this is getting sillier than I remember it being.
I don't disagree as far as some of the elements of the story. However, I was thinking the exact same thing as far as the romantic aspect of it. I don't have a problem with the romance. I do think that the wife, or the fiance, is an added character. It seems forced in there. However, if you really look at the whole cast, she is the only sane person.
That's true. Yes.
Everyone else has that same level of insanity, because it takes a level of insanity to be a storm chaser. Again, you and I have worked with and done tornado coverage often. And the people who are out there following those storms have an adrenaline gland that I don't. Yes. And so there is a level of excitement. So you need that person in there to be like, what you're doing isn't normal.
This is crazy.
And she's correct.
Well, and
she's not wrong at any point. Like, she's portrayed again, I think, as this just screaming, yelling person, but she is kidnapped by storm chasers against her will and thrown into 3 tornadoes.
Essentially,
she has every right to be hysterical.
And they stick her with Philip Seymour Hoffman, who's playing the weirdo in a group of weirdos.
Yes,
and she's there clearly to be a surrogate for the audience, to have like weather explained, because all these people know what weather is, but she can be there for her to go, what does that mean? And then someone can go, right. Oh, well, blank and this, right?
The character should have been better thought out.
I think that she could have been, to me, better ingrained into the story, because I feel like it's obvious what's going to happen the second you meet those 3 characters. The second that Bill Paxton rolls up on Helen Hunt and she's in like her white tank top, I was like, they're gonna get back together. Like I was like, 100%. Oh, they're getting divorced. Okay, now they're getting back together. Like, and it was like, it just kind of like they were trying to get drama out of something that had no drama to me.
Had you not needed that character for the audience, right? I agree that it's not necessary because you could have just had them in the process of a divorce and they fight throughout the whole movie, and so like you understand why they would be going through that process. You know,
and they could do something
type
as simple
A personalities.
They could do something as simple as Bill's a weatherman now, and he's come out here and he's actually brought with him his assistant or his person who's not really hasn't ever done this before, intern, somebody that they could also do that same thing with, and they could have had the same divorce romance, you know, you can't bring your dad back, all that stuff. They could have had all those same things, but I don't know. I feel like it's odd to complain about, but that's just sort of like that was what stood out to me watching it. I was like, they're like this character is not adding as much as I think she's intended to. For me, in 2024, maybe in '96, people loved it. But so let's I want to talk about the characters and sort of the performances. And the director is a guy named Jan de Bont, who he also directed Speed 2, Cruise Control. He directed Lara Croft, The Cradle of Life, or Tomb Raider, I should say, Cradle of Life. And he was a cinematographer for Die Hard and The Hunt for the Red October and Basic Instinct and a bunch of other movies. So like, fellow Oklahoma movie critic Dino Lally talked to him not that long ago about the first movie. It's actually a pretty interesting interview. I think he said that he had a hard time directing Philip Seymour Hoffman because and it wasn't because he didn't say Philip was difficult like as a person. He said Philip was like a very good actor, and he wasn't like an actor's director. He was like a, you know, get the shot kind of. He's a cinematographer. He understands like the frame and the camera lens and how to stage the scene. And he was like, Philip would be like, "What do you think of that?" And you know, he would be like, "Seemed good to me." You seem like you're doing good to me. Don't really have much else to add. I think that was kind of the gist of what he was getting at.
That's funny.
So let's talk about then. What did you think? What do you think of our main characters here? Bill Paxton, Helen Hunt. What do you think of them?
I think that Helen Hunt really stands out. I think that she is the more developed character. I think that she is more well-rounded. And obviously, I mean, the story is essentially about her. It opens that way. You see her tragic connection to tornadoes in the past, which is, whoa, that is a way to start a movie.
Well, can we just talk about,
please.
So let's side tangent on this as we go on. Potentially, dumbest dad in cinema. Like, if the door is getting ripped off of your tornado shelter, do not hold on to it, because I want to point out, little Joe, Helen Hunt, little Joe and Mom, they were in the back of the tornado shelter. Guess where they were? Fine.
Safe and fine. Yep, safe
just
and
stay
sound.
back
Just
there with
back.
them. Stay back there with them. He's like, the door. He was like, I can't hold it any longer. And I'm like, then don't. Let go.
Just don't. You'll be fine.
Advice 1, do not hold on to a storm door when it's being pulled by a tornado. Back to Joe.
Correct.
Traumatic, though, to watch your dad get flung into a tornado. So,
and then to fully want to understand it. I also totally believe the idea that there's some scientist out there who was like, I want to release things in the tornado to collect the data that it gets, because no one's ever done it. And so having that there as a idea for them to kind of surround, I think it makes perfect sense and is really enjoyable. Well,
it's based on the real, so Dorothy, the device is based on the real world Toto, which was developed by the National Organization of NOAA. I don't know, I can't remember what all the letters stand for, but developed by real scientists. And so it has a basis in reality, as odd as it looks when they pop open that thing and you see a bunch of tiny balls with lights beeping on it. It's that's real technology. And so to work on that, Bill Paxton's character being this sort of like trying to move on guy, and their chemistry works, even though a lot of it is shouting at each other. I'm kind of like, I think you guys probably should be divorced. But
They push each other though, and they feed off of each other.
They do. They feed. They push. They clearly have that adrenaline thing, and maybe they're best when chasing because they both have that desire to achieve the next thing. And I like Bill Paxton's sort of like old timey. Oh, the sky's green and smelling, dropping the dirt and all that. Like he's got a very old world tornado chaser way. He can just look at the clouds and go that way. And they're looking at the signs and go, the science doesn't say there's anything there. He goes, it's there. I don't think he says that, but this is the general gist. And so I think your two lead characters I think are really good in this. Hunt is really good. Paxton's really good. Those characters seem like the most thought out.
I agree with that. The villain itself is the Twisters, I think. Those are the antagonists or whatever. But you have Cary Elwes there, and I think that he has one of the worst Oklahoma accents I've ever heard in my life.
If that's what it's supposed to be. I don't know where he's pulling this from. It's kind of a little bit of
Oklahoma.
Everything.
I love Cary Elwes. I've met him here in Oklahoma. Didn't talk about that. We talked about Saw. Thank you very much. But not a good accent. He really not. I mean, I didn't think he was that evil either. I mean, he stole their idea. That's not nice.
But
him himself.
It was a very realistic depiction of a rival in a sense because he's not like overly mean. He is kind of like he doesn't trust them and they don't trust him. But like it's kind of funny because like they call him out for being like he just follows us. Like he doesn't have any idea what he's doing. He just follows us. And then like at every turn he's like, just follow them. Like he doesn't even deny it. Spoiler if you've never seen Twister, but his comeuppance is actually probably one of the most depressing that I've seen for a villain in a while. Because he's got this sidekick who's his driver, right? Who's like
Eddie,
and he doesn't want to do this. They're chasing this giant tornado, and they're like, guys, I think it might shift towards you. And he's like, we should get off the road. And Carrie's like, no, don't. And that dude gets freaking impaled by a giant beam. And Coriel's is just sitting there next to him. And I'm like, why couldn't that be for Curry?
For
that guy
sure.
didn't deserve that. I was like, that guy was reluctant. So, I don't even know if I could replicate the accent that Curry's doing in this movie. Like, well, we're going to have to take care of that. I don't even know. I can't find it. But nice try.
I mean, he's very British. He's very British. And
you can really
Oklahoma
tell.
accents are very different than very British ones. So.
Yeah. You can kind of tell that like there's some like I think that guy's doing I think that guy's got a British accent secretly.
Yeah. Then you had obviously we talked about Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I think is the next most standout character as Stoner Bro Tornado Chaser.
It's coming.
Love this depiction.
Coming. Yeah, the hat, the he's very I feel like they could have gone further with Dusty Davies. That's his name. They could have gone further with this a little bit. Like our introduction to him is that he's kind of an oddball. And he's got this whole thing where he's like, the suck zone. That's the area where things just obviously not the scientific name. But I think they could have probably pushed him a little further. It is kind of unfortunate that it's unfortunate that we lost Philip Seymour Hoffman when we did. For sure. Because he was a tremendous actor. And this is really kind of a fun role for him. I also want to call out some of the other ones. Alan Ruck, who you might know from Ferris Bueller. He's Cameron in Ferris Bueller. You might also know him from Star Trek Generations, where he played Captain of the Enterprise for a brief while. And then I'm going to shout out, I don't know if you're really familiar with this actor, Jeremy Davies.
Oh, yeah. He's Lost.
He's on Lost, right? And he's pretty good on Lost from what I've seen.
Absolutely.
He's also on my favorite show, Justified. He plays his character named Dickie Bennett. He's really good on that. And he was in Saving Private Ryan. He's, what's his name? Upham, I think, in Saving Private Ryan. All around another great character actor. He doesn't have a lot to do in this movie, but frankly, I would have loved to seen. So there's Rabbit, Dusty, and Lawrence. I would have loved to see more with them and maybe less with Dr. Reeves, who I think is very, like, I don't know if there's a more 90s character than Jamie Gertz's Dr. Melissa Reeves, because she's like on the phone, she's a therapist. There's that one part where she's like, she didn't marry you for your penis. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, not just it's a very Carrie Bradshaw Sex and the City-ish kind of character.
Yeah. She was not a well thought out character.
She's also I don't know. Do you ever watch Seinfeld, Garrett? She's the woman that's in the stall next to Elaine, who's like, "No, I can't spare a square. I don't have a square to spare." Like she's that lady. Anywho, there's that, and then I think the last one is Aunt Meg, and that's gonna also be that's Helen Hunt's character. Is that her mother? Or is it her aunt?
Her aunt.
That's her aunt. Okay. Honestly, that last scene where her house gets like destroyed, I think is one of the ones that stands out the most for me in my memory. Is just this giant wrecked house and them trying to save her. Because it's just a great visual. And she does a good job as well.
Should you ever be in the Wakita area, I do highly recommend that you visit the town and the museum, and the people who run it, they can tell you all about it. Many of them live there during the movie. It's just kind of run by people of the town.
Yeah.
So I highly encourage a visit to them. We'll put a link connected somewhere where you can go see the video that Josh and I did. But it's got a lot of cool memorabilia, a lot of cool history. I think if I remember right, you can go see that house. It's obviously not destroyed, but you can go see the house that is representative of that.
Very cool.
Well, I mean, that was several years ago, so take it for what it's worth.
It's very cool. When in Oklahoma, when a movie happens, we don't let anybody forget about it.
Never.
And I wanted, so we teased it at the beginning. I want to talk about the most frustrating scientific inaccuracy of the movie. Okay,
please.
And I've done the research, and apparently this is like everybody. A lot of people talk about this. I bet Steven will talk about this next week.
Yes. Next week, for those of you listening, we are going to have a meteorologist with us to review Twisters. News on 6's own Stephen Aarons will be joining.
Yes, and he'll be able to provide way better than I can. So during the movie, and they get this part mostly right, during the movie they cite the Fujita scale, which is a scale for rating the severity of tornado damage, right? It requires analyzing the damage and the path, and then at that point they will give it the rating. At that time it was F 0 through 5. Now it's EF. They have the enhanced Fujita scale, so now you might hear the term EF1 or EF2. But a key element of that is tornadoes are not rated on this scale until after they've happened. But at many times throughout the movie, they go, it's an F2, maybe F3. Oh, we got an F4 going off over there. Like there's a lot of them saying that they have F2s and F3s going off. And they haven't even touched the ground yet, or they haven't even started circulating yet. And it's it's just very funny. It's very funny when we know too much, I think. Because I was like, oh, they already know it's an F2? Wow, that's amazing. I think generally speaking, tornadoes aren't on the ground for very long. Maybe
usually
most of the time they're on the ground for a few minutes. I think the longest recording tornado on the ground is in the 20-minute zone. And so the idea that they could hear about a tornado and get in their cars and drive to it, who knows how many miles away, and it still be there, is not likely. I suppose it's possible if it's close enough and it's a particularly strong tornado, you could get in your car and drive to a tornado if you knew exactly where it was. But
and those same thing with as far as believability, but those tornado hydro twisters, come on now.
Yeah, the water spouts, it splitting into twins. There's a part so we haven't even talked about the infamous meme scene of the cow. And
we got cows.
That was probably one of the biggest moments of the movie, as far as I remember, pop culture wise, was cows in a tornado, which does happen. Cows can be picked up by tornadoes. But when the cows flow past them in the car, it's it flows past them and then starts to go around them. And it's what? How is that happening? The tornado is over there. And so
they're in the core.
They're in the core, exactly. And it's just circulating cows around them and tractors. There's a lot of explosions in this movie caused by tornadoes, which I can't think of a single time that's ever happened. Can you think of a time?
Power flashes.
There are power flashes, but I've never noticed. I have no knowledge of a semi full being thrown and exploding. I think a strong enough tornado could probably pick up a semi. but you don't normally hear about massive explosions caused by tornadoes in terms of objects being thrown. Also, the last thing, they had talked about they talked about the Fujita scale, and they talked about like, oh, what's the biggest one you've seen? And at the time of the movie being made, there had not been an F5 in Oklahoma, I think, for several years at that point. There would be an EF5 just 5 years later, or 3 years later, in 1999, 4 years later. Gosh, 3 years later. Gosh, David, get the math right. Anyway, there was one in 1999. The most recent EF5 tornado here in Oklahoma was in Moore in 2013. At Oklahoma City, Newcastle area, all those, that kind of general area.
Yeah, they were the two. They were in 1999 also.
And yeah, Moore was also the one hit in 99. It is pretty rare for there to be an EF5 tornado. They get that part right. The only stretch there is the idea that the tornado that Joe went through was an EF5, since they state that was 1969, and there was not a EF5 tornado in 1969 recorded. So, but you know what? They probably didn't have the records exactly the same way that we do now. Now it's really easy to look up that information. In 1996, it was probably a little tougher. But also,
I bet so.
When she would have been going through that in 1969, the Fujita scale had not been created. So it wasn't created until 1972. So there's also some... She's like, oh, I survived an EF5. You don't really know, do you?
You're getting way into the weeds now, the scientific inaccuracies.
I'm sorry. That's just that's it doesn't destroy the movie for me. It is fun to listen to them call out, we got an F2 dropping down over there.
Sure.
Like wind speeds, you can kind of
measure. That is also for the audience, for sure.
Yes. And
the audience has no idea when.
Yeah.
They just know that they know the scale.
They know, they've heard of the scale. They get the idea of like, well, numbers go up, so 2's not as bad as 5.
2's fun. Look at them. There's 2 on the water. Oh,
look over
wow.
there. So
it looks like a ride at Disneyland.
That would be, I mean, it would be pretty cool. But also, I'm sure Steven will get into this next week, but most storm chasers would not do some of the stuff they're doing, like getting out of their truck and running around as a tornado's coming by.
Yes.
I want to put this out there. If you're watching this podcast, here's your PSA. Do not go under an overpass when a tornado's coming at you. Bad idea. They did it in Man of Steel. Don't do it.
So many people think that's the key. Don't do it.
Don't do it. For one of two reasons. There's nothing stopping the tornado from blowing you out to begin with, and you will go flying. And 2, if the tornado hits the bridge, it could collapse. There's not any guarantee that bridge is going to stay above your head. So don't do that. Do not strap yourself to a pipe.
Don't do that.
Anyway, it's very fun though. Like, it's very fun, and if you're not cursed with knowledge about tornadoes, I think it's probably a blast. And even if you are cursed with knowledge, you probably might have a blast. Anyway, that's my rant on the science. I'll leave it at that. I think we had a fun time.
Heck yeah. What's your final thoughts though, David? Like, let us know. Should we see it?
Fun at times, frustrating at others. Side characters needed more shine. I'm probably going to rate it lower than you. I'm going to give it a 3.5. I had fun, but I think it's not aged terribly well for me. But what do you think?
It's still incredibly fun. Honestly, I think that it'll be interesting next week when we have a certified meteorologist here, and see how they enjoy it, because they do know the science and they are big fans. And I think that it's because you know the science, for them it's like, just make it crazy, man. Just make it crazy. And I think this movie ups every time. I think it is a really very strong disaster movie. And I think it holds up well. I got too many connections to it. Listen, it's got its critiques, right? So it's not a 5-star movie, but it will be a 4.5-star movie from me.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. I can go with that. So overall, we enjoyed ourselves. Oh, let's play the letterbox game.
I know we got to do a letterbox game. I don't even know how we're going to do this with just the two of us, but we can figure it out. We're resourceful. Yeah.
Do you want to pull it up? Do you want me to pull it up?
I got it. We can pull it up. Okay.
All right.
You leading now?
I think I'm in the lead. I'm in the lead right now in terms of the Letterboxd game stats. And so I think I'll give you the courtesy of going first if that's what you want.
3.8. I'm just
3.8?
going in. Just ready. Yep, I think that people are going to find it fun and enjoyable.
It's a good guess. I'm going to go a little lower, and I'm going to say 3.4.
Ooh. I'm a little stunned. I did the big reveal of
Okay, just reveal it to yourself?
Yeah, and it is much lower than what I anticipated. And even a little lower than what you anticipated.
Really?
But based on math, you still won. It's 3.2 according to Letterboxd.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, only 1 point from me this week. That's kind of crazy. I think that's
people were rating it too much like movie critics here. I think you have to. This movie is fun first, movie second.
Yeah, what's the top reviews say?
Let me see. I didn't pull it up. I forgot about that part.
That's okay. We're flying with no wings this week.
We do. Let's see. Oh, that one's got spoilers on it. I don't want to do that. All of them are too long. This one says watched in 4D. I turned on the electric fan in the highest setting. It was intense. There we go. 3.5 stars.
Maybe that would have helped me. Maybe that would have helped me if I had a little wind blowing. I was a little distracted when watching this movie. I got to be honest. There was a couple other things on my mind at the time, but I still had fun.
Well, what else? Is there anything that we have to do? I don't remember all the rules.
I don't think
Josh
so.
does this part.
That's another win for me. That puts me at 13. You're at 10. That's my first non-direct hit of the year, so I got to get back on my game. Wow. And next week, Josh will be back. You guys will have a chance to get a win without me. I'm sure that if you give, maybe Steven will win, so that nobody gets points that's in the main part of the competition. But I hope you guys have fun. I hope I get to catch Twisters at some point. I'm a big fan of Glenn Powell so far. And I don't know who else is in that movie, really. But looks crazy. They're going to have a fire tornado. They're going to have twins. And all kinds of other fun over-the-top tornadoes. You know what's funny is when I was a kid, I thought the movie was one long tornado. I thought the whole movie was just one tornado that they kept having to catch up to. But it's actually several. So I imagine that's going to be the case with Twisters as well.
For sure.
Well, that's it for this week.
Yeah, that's all for this episode of So Many Sequels. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel where, again, we're trying to get to the infamous number of 316. Just because, really, that's what it all boils down to, is just because. It's an easy number to get.
It's a fun number.
Yes. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Leave us ratings. You can definitely leave ratings on both. 5 stars would be good, but be honest with yourself. It's 5 stars. And then eventually Spotify is doing some comments and stuff, so we might be able to interact then. Keep an eye out for that. We would love to hear from you in all those ways. You can also follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Facebook, and stay in touch with us and let us know what you think of the show. You can also visit us at SoManySequels.com for all of this stuff that I have just said. Probably should have just led with that. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.